Emma Calloway, 31. I never imagined my sister's wedding would trigger the greatest family implosion of my life. The message from my parents was simple: you're banned from attending in person. You can watch the live stream. That's when I knew 15 years of family secrets were about to unravel, and Meghan's perfect day would become the battleground where justice was finally served. Hey, before I dive into this wild family revenge drama, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. If this story of family betrayal and sweet justice resonates with you, hit that like button and subscribe to join our storytelling community. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this wedding disaster unfolds. Now, let's get back to how it all began. Growing up in suburban Chicago, I always lived in Meghan's shadow. 2 years younger than me, she somehow became the sun our family orbited around. While I struggled with social anxiety and pursued a practical degree in accounting, Meghan effortlessly collected friends' achievements and our parents' adoration. She was the homecoming queen valedictorian and eventually landed at an Ivy League school with a full scholarship. Our parents' dad, a successful orthodontist, and mom, a former beauty queen turned interior designer, never missed an opportunity to showcase her accomplishments. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became the unofficial soundtrack of my adolescence. Family gatherings were Meghan highlight reels with me, relegated to the background. When I graduated college with honors, despite working 2 jobs to support myself, my parents hosted a small dinner. When Meghan finished her degree, they threw an extravagant party with over 100 guests. The disparity was so normal to me that I no longer questioned it. The pattern continued into adulthood. I built a modest but successful career as a financial analyst, purchased my own condo, and created a life I was proud of. Meanwhile, Meghan drifted between glamorous but unstable career paths: fashion buyer, marketing coordinator for luxury brands, social media consultant, each funded by generous loans from our parents that never seemed to require repayment. When Meghan started dating Bradley Winthrop III, heir to a hotel fortune, my parents' excitement reached fever pitch. After a whirlwind 6-month romance, Bradley proposed with a diamond the size of a quail egg. The wedding planning immediately consumed our entire family ecosystem, with my mother acting as unofficial coordinator despite the couple hiring a professional team. The engagement party was my first indication that something was different this time. As I circulated through the crowd of Chicago's elite at the Winthrop family's lakeside estate, Bradley's college roommate James approached me. "You must be Emma," he said. "The mysterious older sister I've heard so little about." His comment caught me off guard. Mysterious, that's a first. I'm usually just the boring one. He smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Bradley mentioned you're the financial whiz. I'm in private equity, maybe we speak the same language." For the first time at a family event, I found myself engaged in conversation that didn't make me feel invisible. James was intelligent and attentive, asking thoughtful questions about my work and life. As the evening progressed, I realized with surprise that I was actually enjoying myself. "Your sister seems different than you," James observed, as we watched Meghan hold court with a group of admirers. "We're practically different species," I replied. "Always have been. And yet you're here supporting her. That's what family does, right?" He gave me an appraising look. "Some families maybe." As the wedding plans accelerated, I was surprised when Meghan asked me to be her maid of honor. We had never been close, and she had a coterie of glamorous friends who seemed better suited for the role. When I asked her why, her answer was revealing. "Mom and Dad insisted," she said with a shrug. "Something about family tradition. Plus, it'll look good in the photos if you lose 15 pounds and get some highlights." I agreed, partly out of obligation, and partly because a small part of me still yearned for my family's approval. As maid of honor, I dutifully attended cake tastings, floral consultations, and venue tours. I organized a lavish bachelorette weekend in Napa Valley that drained my savings account. I listened to Meghan's complaints about Bradley's mother's interference and our mother's controlling tendencies. What no one knew was that through all these events, James and I continued to meet for coffee, then dinners, developing a connection that surprised us both. He became my confidant, the one person who seemed to see me clearly. And slowly through his eyes, I began to see my family dynamics with painful clarity. "You realize none of this is normal, right?" he asked one evening, after I described my parents forgetting my birthday but sending Meghan an extravagant gift for no occasion at all. "It's just how it's always been," I said. "That doesn't make it right," he replied, his hand covering mine across the table. "You deserve better, Emma." 3 months before the wedding, everything changed. And looking back now, I should have seen it coming. The revelation came on a rain-soaked Tuesday in April, exactly 84 days before Meghan's meticulously planned June wedding. I was at my parents' house sorting through boxes of family photos for the wedding slideshow Meghan had demanded. My mother had instructed me to focus on the beautiful moments code for featuring Meghan prominently while minimizing my presence. The attic was stifling despite the cool spring weather, dust particles dancing in the beams of light from the small window. I had been working for hours, my back aching from hunching over cardboard boxes, filled with memories that felt increasingly like propaganda for a family narrative that excluded me. At the bottom of a faded blue box labeled Family Documents, I found a manila envelope I'd never seen before. Inside was a stack of papers that would shatter everything I thought I knew about my family. The first document was my birth certificate, nothing unusual there. But beneath it was another birth certificate, also with my name, but with different parents listed. Attached was a private adoption agreement dated just 2 weeks after my birth, and signed by my parents, or rather the people I had always known as my parents. My hands trembled as I read through the documents. According to these papers, I wasn't born Emma Calloway. I was born Emma Mitchell, to a young woman named Sarah Mitchell, who had been my mother's college roommate. Sarah had died shortly after giving birth to me, a detail confirmed by a newspaper obituary also tucked into the envelope. My father was listed as unknown. The final document was a letter from Sarah to my mother dated during her pregnancy. "Vivian, if anything happens to me, please take care of my baby. I know you and Robert have been trying for so long. Maybe this is fate's way of making us all a family." I sat frozen amid the scattered photos of a family that I now realized had never truly been mine. The golden childhood albums featuring Meghan's ballet recitals and soccer trophies took on a new, sinister light. I wasn't just the less favored daughter, I was never their daughter at all. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Have you finished with those photos yet? Meghan needs them by tomorrow for the video editor." I didn't respond. Instead, I carefully photographed each document, returned them exactly as I'd found them, and descended from the attic with the selected photos my mother expected, and a truth that burned inside me like acid. That night I couldn't sleep. The pieces were falling into place with devastating clarity. The preferential treatment of Meghan, the constant comparisons, the subtle and not so subtle ways they had always made me feel like an outsider. I had spent my entire life trying to earn the love of people who had never intended to give it equally. The next morning I called in sick to work and drove to the county records office. By afternoon I had confirmed everything. I, Emma Calloway, was adopted, a fact my parents had hidden from me for 31 years. I should have confronted them immediately. A healthier person might have. Instead, I did what I had always done. I internalized the pain and began to observe. Now that I knew what to look for, the evidence of their deception was everywhere. At Sunday dinner that weekend, my mother casually mentioned, "Meghan has always had my eyes, don't you think? And Robert's determination." My father nodded proudly. The best of both of us. Neither looked at me as they spoke, but for the first time, I recognized their avoidance for what it was, guilt perhaps, or the discomfort of perpetuating a lie in my presence. As the wedding preparations intensified, I maintained my role as the dutiful maid of honor. I attended fittings for a bridesmaid dress that cost more than a month of my rent. I listened to Megan complain about Bradley's annoying request to include his elderly grandmother in the ceremony. I watched my parents empty their retirement accounts to fund Megan's fairy tale day. Through it all, James became my anchor. When I finally shared my discovery with him over dinner at his apartment, his reaction confirmed why I had grown to trust him. "I suspected something wasn't right with how they treat you," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "But this is beyond dysfunctional, it's cruel." "What do I do?" I asked, feeling more lost than I ever had. "What do you want to do?" The question hung between us. What did I want? Confrontation, acknowledgement, revenge, or simply the truth spoken aloud after 3 decades of silence? "I want them to admit what they did," I said finally. "Not just keeping the adoption secret, but how they've treated me my entire life because of it." James took my hand across the table. "Then that's what we'll make happen." That night, as James held me, I made a decision. The wedding that had always been about Megan, like everything else in our family, would become the stage for a different kind of ceremony, the unveiling of the truth. What I didn't know then was that the adoption secret was just the beginning. There was more buried in my family's past connections I hadn't yet made, and consequences none of us could foresee. For the next 2 weeks, I lived a double life. By day, I was Emma, the dutiful maid of honor addressing envelopes for thank you cards and confirming RSVPs. By night, I became an investigator of my own life, piecing together the fragments of a truth my family had buried. I tracked down Sarah Mitchell's younger sister Claire, who now lived in Seattle. Our first phone call lasted 3 hours. "I always wondered what happened to you," she said, her voice breaking. "They told us you'd been adopted by a loving family, but they wouldn't provide details. Closed adoption, they said." "Did you try to find me?" I asked, surprised by how much I needed the answer to be yes, every few years. "But your parents, the Callaways, they had good lawyers." Every inquiry hit a dead end. Claire emailed me photos of Sarah, my biological mother, and I was startled by our resemblance. We had the same heart-shaped face, the same slight dimple in our left cheek. I learned that Sarah had been an accountant, that she loved classic films, and hiking, that she had a dry sense of humor that sometimes caught people off guard. I saw myself in these details, pieces of identity I had always assumed were random traits rather than inheritance. "There's something else you should know," Claire said toward the end of our conversation. "Sarah wasn't some random college friend of Vivian's. They were closer than that. They were roommates all through college, and afterward they shared an apartment in Chicago for 2 years. This detail surprised me. My mother had never mentioned living with Sarah beyond their college years. Were they just close friends, or? Claire hesitated. "I think there was more to it. Sarah never officially came out to our family, but she had photos of her and Vivian that seemed intimate. When Sarah got pregnant, there was a falling out. She never told me exactly what happened, but she moved back home to have the baby. Then she died from complications after giving birth. A new picture was forming, one where my adoption wasn't just an act of charity toward a dead friend, but something more complex, possibly even calculated. My research led me deeper. I discovered that my father, Robert Calloway, had been investigated for financial irregularities at his orthodontic practice around the time of my adoption. The case had been suddenly dropped, all records sealed. The timing seemed too coincidental. James helped me connect with a private investigator who specialized in financial crimes. Within days, we learned that Robert had been on the verge of being charged with insurance fraud billing for procedures that never happened, upgrading simple treatments to complex ones in the paperwork. The case disappeared when a key witness recanted their testimony, and critical evidence went missing from the prosecutor's office. That key witness, Sarah Mitchell's father, who had worked for the insurance company investigating the fraud. The more I uncovered, the clearer the picture became. My parents hadn't adopted me out of love or even obligation to a deceased friend. I was their insurance policy, their leverage to escape criminal charges. They had used Sarah's dying wish to manipulate her family, essentially trading a baby me for their freedom and reputation. With this knowledge burning inside me, I met James for dinner at our favorite restaurant, a small Italian place where the owner knew us by name. I need to confront them, I said, pushing my barely touched risotto around the plate. Before the wedding, I need them to admit what they did. James looked concerned. Are you sure they've kept this secret for 3 decades? They're not going to confess easily. Then what do you suggest? He considered for a moment. Evidence speaks louder than accusations. If you confront them privately, they'll deny everything. But with the right pressure in the right setting, that's when the plan began to take shape. James had experience in corporate negotiations where leverage was everything. Together, we crafted a strategy that would force my parents to face their deception not just with me but with everyone who mattered to them. The key we determined was Megan. She was their true daughter, their golden child, the center of their universe. Did she know I was adopted? Was she complicit in their deception or another victim of their lies? I needed to find out before proceeding. The opportunity came during her final dress fitting. As we waited for the seamstress to make adjustments, Megan sipped champagne and scrolled through her phone, barely acknowledging my presence. "Can I ask you something?" I said carefully. "Growing up, did you ever feel like Mom and Dad treated us differently?" She looked up surprised by the personal question. "What do you mean? You know, like they favored one of us?" Megan laughed, a brittle sound devoid of humor. "Oh please, Emma. Don't play the victim card now. We both know they've always bent over backward for you." I nearly choked on my champagne. What? The special tutors, the therapy sessions, the way they were always so careful with your feelings. Meanwhile, I had to be perfect all the time. 1B+ and Dad wouldn't speak to me for days. I slip up once at a piano recital and Mom made me practice until my fingers bled. Her version of our childhood was so divorced from reality that for a moment I wondered if we had grown up in the same house. "Megan, what are you talking about? They've always adored you." I was the afterthought. She rolled her eyes. "That's what you think, God, you're so clueless. They were terrified you'd find out and leave them, so they overcompensated with me. Made me the visible success story while pouring all the real resources into you behind the scenes." "Find out what?" I asked, my heart pounding. The seamstress returned before Megan could answer, and the moment passed. But her words lingered. She knew something, not the whole truth perhaps, but enough to have her own distorted understanding of our family dynamic. That evening, I adjusted our plan. Megan wasn't just a bystander in this drama. She was a player with her own grievances, her own version of events. The revelation at the wedding needed to expose the full truth to everyone, including my sister. As the wedding date grew closer, I continued my maid of honor duties while gathering evidence. James used his connections to obtain sealed court documents related to my father's aborted fraud case. Claire sent me letters Sarah had written to her family during her pregnancy, detailing her relationship with Vivian and her hopes for her unborn child. 3 weeks before the wedding, everything was in place except for one final piece. "You need to get them to admit it on record," James advised. "Something irrefutable." The opportunity came at the rehearsal dinner walkthrough. My parents had insisted on seeing the venue, an exclusive country club overlooking Lake Michigan, one more time before committing to the final payment. I arrived early, hiding a small recording device in the private dining room where we would be meeting. When my parents arrived, I steered the conversation toward family history, claiming I wanted to prepare a special toast for Megan. "I've been thinking about family lately," I said casually, as my mother examined the table settings. "About what makes us who we are." "Genetics are only part of the story," my father said dismissively. "Environment shapes character far more significantly." That's convenient for you to believe, I replied, my voice steady, despite my racing heart, considering I don't share your genetics at all. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's face drained of color, while my father's jaw tightened, the same expression he wore when confronting an unexpected business challenge. What are you talking about? My mother finally managed her voice barely above a whisper. I found the adoption papers, Mom. I know about Sarah Mitchell. I know everything. What followed was 30 minutes of denial, then anger, then desperate justification. They had protected me by keeping the truth hidden. They had given me a better life than I would have had otherwise. They had always treated me exactly the same as Megan. When I challenged this last claim with specific examples of their preferential treatment, my father's facade finally cracked. What did you expect? He hissed. You were a transaction, not a choice. We fulfilled our obligation by raising you. No one said we had to love you the same. My mother gasped at his bluntness, but she didn't contradict him. In her silence, I heard confirmation of everything I had suspected. I left the rehearsal dinner walkthrough with exactly what I needed, their confession recorded and undeniable. The final piece of my plan was in place. That night, I received a text from Megan. Mom says, you're causing drama again. Get it together, or step down as maid of honor. This is my wedding. I didn't respond. 3 days later, the text from my parents arrived. You're banned from attending the wedding in person. You can watch the livestream. They thought they were punishing me. In reality, they had just made my plan infinitely easier to execute. 2 weeks before Megan's wedding, the family facade began cracking beyond repair. After my confrontation with my parents at the venue walkthrough, they closed ranks against me. Their text message banning me from the wedding was just the beginning. They informed the wedding planner, the venue security, and even Bradley's family that I was unstable and had threatened to disrupt the ceremony. My phone filled with confused messages from extended family members and mutual friends, all wondering what I had done to deserve such treatment. I maintained radio silence, neither confirming nor denying the allegations. Every unanswered message increased the speculation exactly as I had anticipated. People love nothing more than family drama, especially when it threatens to explode at a high society wedding. James was my constant support during this tumultuous period. They're getting desperate, he observed, as we reviewed the latest round of texts from my mother, demanding I return the family heirloom jewelry I'd borrowed for a previous wedding event. They know you have leverage and they're trying to discredit you before you can use it. It won't work, I said with a confidence that surprised even me. The truth doesn't disappear just because they want it to. The most unexpected development came from Bradley's side of the family. His mother, Catherine Winthrop, a formidable woman with old money and older values, reached out to me directly. I don't know what's happening in your family, she said over tea at her lakeside mansion, but I do know that a mother doesn't ban her daughter from a wedding without extraordinary circumstances. And my son says James speaks very highly of you. I hadn't realized that James had discussed me with Bradley. This connection felt like another piece falling into place in a puzzle I hadn't fully seen yet. Mrs. Winthrop, I said carefully, I discovered recently that I was adopted under questionable circumstances. When I confronted my parents, they reacted defensively. That's all. She studied me with sharp eyes that missed nothing. The Callaways have always seemed a bit too perfect to me. Perfect things often hide imperfect truths. Her words resonated with something I had felt my entire life but never articulated. My family's carefully constructed image, successful, professional, father, beautiful, mother, golden child, daughter, and me, the dutiful background figure, had been a performance for as long as I could remember. What will you do now? She asked. Attend my sister's wedding, I replied simply. Catherine Winthrop raised a perfectly groomed eyebrow. Despite being banned, some invitations are more important than others. She smiled, then a small satisfied expression. I look forward to seeing how this unfolds. As the wedding week arrived, my parents escalated their campaign against me. They froze my access to family accounts, largely symbolic, since I had established my own financial independence years ago. They had my childhood bedroom packed up, and the contents delivered to my condo in unmarked boxes. They even contacted my employer suggesting I was experiencing a mental health crisis and might need a leave of absence, a move that backfired when my boss, aware of my exemplary work record, informed them that my personal life was not their concern. 5 days before the wedding, Megan finally called me directly. "What the hell are you doing?" she demanded without preamble. "Mom is having migraines, Dad's blood pressure is through the roof, and I'm trying to finalize the biggest day of my life while my family implodes. I found out I'm adopted," I said calmly. "Did you know?" The pause before she answered told me everything. "Not at first," she admitted finally. "I overheard them arguing about it when I was 14. Mom wanted to tell you, Dad refused. He said it would disrupt the family dynamic. And you never thought to tell me. We're sisters, Megan." She laughed, a harsh sound through the phone. "Are we? Because according to biology, and apparently our parents, we're not. We're just two people who grew up in the same house." Her words stung more than I expected. Despite everything, some part of me had still hoped that Megan and I shared a real bond. "That's not fair," I said quietly. "We're sisters because we grew up together, shared a bathroom, fought over clothes. DNA doesn't change that." "Then why are you trying to ruin my wedding? If we're really sisters, you'd step back and let me have my day." "This isn't about your wedding, it's about 30 years of lies." "Same difference. You're making my wedding about you and your identity crisis." Classic Emma move. Her dismissal of my entire existence as an identity crisis was the final confirmation I needed. Megan wasn't just a bystander in our parents' deception, she was an active participant in maintaining the family mythology at my expense. "Enjoy your perfect day," I said before hanging up. "I'll be watching." The stress of the confrontations took a physical toll. I developed insomnia, lost weight, and found myself jumping every time my phone chimed with a notification. James noticed my deterioration and insisted I stay at his place the night before the wedding. "You don't have to go through with this," he said as we sat on his balcony watching the sunset over the Chicago skyline. "We can walk away, start fresh, somewhere new. Leave them to their lies." For a moment I was tempted. The idea of escaping, of building a life unburdened by my family's toxic dynamics was seductive. But then I thought of Sarah Mitchell, my real mother, dying without justice, and of the decades I had spent trying to earn love that was never freely given. "I can't," I said finally, "not just for me, but for her. For Sarah. She trusted them with her child, and they turned me into a secret, a bargaining chip. I need everyone to know what they did." James nodded slowly. "Then we stick to the plan. But promise me one thing: after tomorrow, whatever happens, you prioritize your healing. This family has taken enough from you." I leaned against his shoulder, drawing strength from his unwavering support. "I promise." That night, I finally slept deeply for the first time in weeks. In my dreams, I saw a woman with my heart-shaped face and dimpled cheek smiling with pride. When I woke, I felt a clarity and purpose that had been missing in the chaotic lead-up to this day. The morning of Megan's wedding dawned bright and clear, the kind of perfect June day that wedding planners pray for. I dressed carefully in the outfit I had chosen for this occasion, not the sage green bridesmaid dress that had been altered to my measurements, but a simple, elegant white blouse and blue skirt that reminded me of something I had seen Sarah wearing in one of Claire's photos. As I prepared to set our plan in motion, my phone chimed with a text from an unexpected source, Bradley, the groom himself. "Before today happens, you should know something else. It's about James." The message was cryptic enough to give me pause. I called Bradley immediately. "What about James?" I demanded when he answered. Bradley's voice was low, as if he was hiding from the wedding preparations happening around him. Did he tell you how we really know each other? It's not just from college. What are you talking about, James Mitchell? His mother was Sarah Mitchell. He's your half-brother, Emma. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. James was Sarah's son, my brother, the man I had been falling in love with who had helped me plan my family confrontation, was actually part of the very history I was trying to uncover. That's impossible, I whispered though. Even as I said it, pieces were clicking into place. His immediate connection with me at the engagement party, his understanding of my family dynamics, his eagerness to help me expose my parents. He found out about you years ago, Bradley continued. He's been looking for you. When I started dating Megan and met your family, he recognized your parents' names from his own research. That's why he came to the engagement party to meet you. Why didn't he tell me? My voice sounded distant, as if it belonged to someone else. You'll have to ask him that. But Emma, he's not just helping you confront your parents, he has his own score to settle. I thanked Bradley mechanically and ended the call, my mind reeling. I needed to speak with James immediately to understand why he had hidden his true identity from me, while encouraging me to uncover the truth about mine. But as I reached for my keys, my phone lit up with another notification, this one from the wedding livestream service, informing all virtual guests that the ceremony would begin in 2 hours. I had a decision to make: confront James about his deception, or proceed with our plan to expose my parents' lies to everyone attending Megan's wedding. The clock was ticking, and whatever I decided would permanently alter the course of not just my life, but everyone connected to the Calloway family. Are you on the edge of your seat yet? I know I'm getting emotional, just telling this story. If you're feeling the tension building like I was, hit that like button, and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what happens next. I'd love to know what you think James's real motives might be. Drop your theories in the comments below. Now, let's get back to the most intense day of my life. I had exactly 1 hour and 58 minutes to decide whether to confront James about his deception or proceed with our original plan. In the end, I chose a third option. I would do both, but on my terms. I called James, my voice steady, despite the emotional earthquake happening inside me. We need to talk. Now. 20 minutes later, we sat in his car in a park, halfway between his apartment and the wedding venue. The Chicago skyline glittered in the distance, indifferent to our personal drama. Were you ever going to tell me? I asked without preamble. The color drained from his face. How did you find out? Bradley called me. Apparently he has more integrity than you do. The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. James ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I had once found endearing but now seemed calculated, part of a performance designed to win my trust. I was going to tell you after the wedding. I didn't want to complicate things. Complicate things? You're my half-brother, you let me. We almost. I couldn't finish the sentence, the implications too painful to articulate. I never intended for us to get that close, he said quietly. When I first found you, I just wanted to meet my sister to understand the other half of my family story. But then I saw how they treated you and I got angry. The plan to expose them became more important than telling you who I really was. So you used me, I said flatly. Just like they did. He flinched. No, not like that. I genuinely care about you, Emma. You're my sister. My family. Half-sister, I corrected. And family doesn't lie to each other for months. Family doesn't manipulate emotions for personal vendettas. Is that what you think this is? A vendetta? His voice rose slightly. Our mother died because of Robert Calloway's fraud. She was stressed, hiding from investigators who were pressuring her to testify against him. Her blood pressure spiked, causing complications during your birth. His crimes literally killed her, and then he took you as his get-out-of-jail-free card. The raw pain in his voice was impossible to fake. Whatever his motivations, James truly believed our parents, the Calloways, were responsible for Sarah's death. How do you know all this? I asked, some of my anger giving way to confusion. My grandparents raised me. They never hid the truth about Sarah or about you. They tried to find you to challenge the adoption, but the Callaways had powerful connections. Every legal avenue was blocked. When I was 18, my grandfather gave me all the documentation he had saved, including evidence of Robert's fraud that never made it to court. This new information shifted my understanding yet again. If James was telling the truth, and the anguish in his eyes suggested he was, then my adoptive parents were even more culpable than I had realized. They hadn't just hidden my identity. They had potentially contributed to my biological mother's death, then used me to escape consequences. Why not tell me this from the beginning? I asked, the betrayal still fresh. Would you have believed a stranger who approached you claiming to be your long-lost brother with a story about your parents being criminals, or would you have reported me to the police as a stalker? He sighed heavily. I needed you to discover the truth yourself, to reach your own conclusions before I revealed my connection. I sat silently processing his explanation. It made a certain strategic sense, but the manipulation still stung. And what happens after today? After we expose everything at Megan's wedding, that's up to you, he said simply. I've spent my life searching for my sister. Now I've found you. What happens next is your choice. We can be siblings or strangers. Either way, the Callaways need to face what they've done. The wedding livestream would begin in just over an hour. We still had time to execute our plan, a plan that now carried even more significance given James's revelations about our mother's death. Okay, I said finally. We proceed as planned. But afterward, you and I have a lot more to discuss about boundaries and trust. James nodded, relief visible in the loosening of his shoulders. That's fair. We drove to the venue separately. While James would attend in person as Bradley's college friend, I would access the ceremony remotely, just as my parents had insisted. But unlike the passive virtual guest they expected me to be, I had prepared a much more active participation. The livestream began punctually at 2:00 p.m. From my laptop in a coffee shop 3 blocks from the country club, I watched the elegant ceremony unfold. The venue was breathtaking, white roses and crystal chandeliers, string quartet playing softly, Lake Michigan, sparkling in the background. The guests, Chicago's elite in designer formal wear, murmured appreciatively as the music changed to indicate the ceremony was beginning. My father appeared at the entrance to escort Megan down the aisle. She was undeniably beautiful in her custom gown, though her smile seemed tight around the edges, stress from the family drama of recent weeks perhaps. I waited until precisely the right moment when the officiant asked if anyone knew of any reason why this couple should not be joined in matrimony. In the momentary silence that followed, I executed our plan. First, I activated the program James had helped me create, overriding the venue's digital displays. Screens that had been showing tasteful wedding photos now switched to display the adoption documents and fraud evidence we had gathered. Simultaneously, I connected to the venue's sound system through the credentials James had obtained from a sympathetic AV technician. Ladies and gentlemen, my voice echoed through the hall, interrupting the ceremony. I apologize for this unconventional entrance. My name is Emma Calloway, or rather Emma Mitchell, and there's something you all need to know before this wedding continues. Chaos erupted immediately. My parents leapt to their feet, my father frantically signaling to the technical staff while my mother covered her mouth in horror. Megan stood frozen at the altar, her perfect day imploding before her eyes. 31 years ago, I continued, my voice steady despite the commotion. Robert and Vivian Calloway adopted me under fraudulent circumstances to escape criminal charges. They've hidden this truth my entire life, while systematically favoring their biological daughter. Today, that ends. On the screens throughout the venue, evidence scrolled for all to see. The adoption papers, the court documents from my father's fraud case, the witness statements that had mysteriously disappeared, and finally, the damning recording from The rehearsal dinner walkthrough. My father's voice filled the room. You were a transaction, not a choice. We fulfilled our obligation by raising you. No one said we had to love you the same. The gasps from the assembled guests were audible even through the live stream. In the front row, Catherine Winthrop's expression shifted from shock to something like grim satisfaction. Bradley stood bewildered beside a now sobbing Megan. What happened next I hadn't anticipated. James, who had been seated discreetly among Bradley's college friends, stood up. My name is James Mitchell, he announced, his voice carrying across the stunned silence. Sarah Mitchell was my mother. She was also Emma's mother. She died because of Robert Calloway's criminal actions and the stress of being pressured to protect him. The Calloways didn't just steal a child, they contributed to a woman's death, then used her orphan daughter as leverage to escape justice. My father, his face purple with rage, lunged toward James but was restrained by two of Bradley's groomsmen. My mother collapsed into her chair, decades of careful social engineering crumbling around her. Megan, in a move that surprised me, yanked the microphone from the stunned officiant. Is this true? She demanded, looking directly at our parents. Have you been lying to all of us for 30 years? When neither responded, their silence was confirmation enough. The wedding is postponed, she announced, her voice breaking. Then, looking directly at the camera at me, she added, Emma, we need to talk. Not as Calloways, but as sisters. The livestream erupted into chaos before abruptly cutting off. My phone immediately began buzzing with messages from relatives, friends, even journalists who had caught wind of the high society scandal unfolding at the Winthrop Calloway wedding. I sat back in my coffee shop chair, emotionally drained but strangely peaceful. The truth was out. Whatever happened next, I would face it as Emma Mitchell, not as the shadow daughter of the Calloway family. In the 72 hours following what Chicago Society columns dubbed the wedding that wasn't my life, transformed in ways I could never have predicted. The initial shockwaves rippled outward, touching everyone connected to the Calloway and Winthrop families. My parents fled to their lake house immediately after the ceremony collapsed, refusing all contact. Their phones went straight to voicemail. Their email auto-replies announced an unexpected family emergency, and their house in the city stood empty, the curtains drawn. The empire they had built on lies and careful social engineering was crumbling brick by brick. Megan surprisingly reached out to me first. Her text came at 3 a.m. the day after the wedding. My entire life is a lie. I don't know who I am anymore. Can we meet? We arranged to meet at a neutral location, a small diner far from our usual haunts where no one would recognize the almost bride or her newly discovered adopted sister. When Megan arrived, her transformation was shocking. Gone was the polished society princess, replaced by a woman in yoga pants and an oversized sweater, her face bare of makeup, her eyes swollen from crying. I always thought I was the victim, she said, without preamble, sliding into the booth opposite me. I thought they pushed me so hard because they loved me more, expected more from me. But they were just using me too, making me into their perfect showcase child to distract from their secrets. They manipulated us both, I agreed, surprised by the lack of satisfaction I felt at her distress. I had imagined this moment differently, expected to relish Megan's fall from grace. Instead, I saw another victim of our parents' machinations, albeit one who had enjoyed more privileges along the way. Did you know? Bradley called off the engagement, she asked, stirring her coffee endlessly without drinking it. Said he couldn't marry into a family built on lies. As if the Winthrops don't have skeletons in their closets. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it. Whatever issues existed between Megan and me, she hadn't deserved to have her relationship destroyed. She shrugged, a gesture so un-Megan like that, it underscored how profoundly recent events had changed her. Maybe it's for the best. I was marrying him partly because it was what Mom and Dad wanted, the perfect alliance. I'm not sure I even know what I want anymore. Over the next 2 hours, Megan and I talked more openly than we ever had in our shared childhood. She revealed the immense pressure she'd faced, the expectation of perfection, the subtle threats that love was conditional on achievement, the constant reminders that the Calloway name must be upheld at all costs. I shared the pain of always feeling inadequate, of trying to earn affection that never came, of sensing I was different without understanding why. "We're still sisters," she said as we prepared to leave. "Maybe not by blood, but by shared experience. No one else will ever understand what it was like growing up in that house." Her words were an unexpected balm to a wound I hadn't realized was still bleeding. The fear that in exposing the truth I had lost the only family I'd ever known. James and I met the following day in the same park where we'd had our confrontation before the wedding. The awkwardness between us was palpable. We were strangers who shared DNA, connected by a mother neither of us had known and a history neither of us had lived. The Calloway Foundation's board of directors has called an emergency meeting. He informed me all business now that our shared mission was accomplished. They're considering removing Robert as chairman in light of the fraud evidence that's resurfaced. "Good," I said simply. We sat in uncomfortable silence for several minutes before James spoke again. "I didn't lie about everything. I do care about you, not romantically obviously. But as my sister. Half-sister," I corrected automatically, then sighed. "Sorry. This is all still strange. I know. For what it's worth, I never intended to hurt you. When I first found you, I just wanted to meet the sister I'd heard about my whole life. Then I saw how they treated you and—" He trailed off. "And you got protective," I finished for him. "And angry." "Yeah." Another silence stretched between us, less strained than before. Our grandparents would like to meet you," James said eventually. "When you're ready. No pressure." The idea of having biological family who actually wanted to know me was still novel enough to bring tears to my eyes. I'd like that, not immediately, but soon. As the week progressed, the professional consequences for my parents materialized with surprising speed. My father's dental practice partners initiated proceedings to buy out his share, citing reputational concerns. The charity boards my mother chaired quietly asked for her resignation. Family friends chose sides, with many distancing themselves from the scandal, while a loyal few defended the Calloways as victims of a vengeful daughter. Claire, my biological aunt, flew in from Seattle, and we spent a day together filling in the gaps of each other's lives. She brought more photos of Sarah, my mother, and stories that helped me construct a more complete image of the woman who had given birth to me. "She would be so proud of you," Claire said, holding my hand across the table in her hotel restaurant. "Not just for exposing the truth, but for the woman you've become despite everything." 10 days after the wedding, my parents finally reached out through their lawyer requesting a private meeting to discuss recent events and potential paths forward. I agreed, but with conditions. The meeting would take place in my lawyer's office. James would be present and there would be no discussion of keeping the scandal quiet. This was not a negotiation, but a reckoning. When I walked into the conference room and saw my parents for the first time since the wedding, I was struck by how diminished they appeared. My father, always imposing in his tailored suits and perfect posture, seemed to have aged a decade. My mother's immaculate facade had cracked, her designer outfit wrinkled, her makeup imprecise. "Emma," my mother began, her voice faltering. "What you did was expose the truth," I finished firmly. "After 31 years of lies." My father cleared his throat. "We made mistakes. Serious ones. But everything we did was to protect our family." "No," James interjected. "Everything you did was to protect yourselves. Emma was never your family, she was your insurance policy." The meeting proceeded with painful honesty on all sides. My parents admitted to using the adoption to pressure Sarah's father into dropping his testimony. They confessed to deliberately keeping me at arm's length emotionally, while maintaining appearances of a perfect family. My father acknowledged the financial fraud that had started the entire chain of events. "We did grow to care for you," my mother insisted, tears streaming down her face. "In our own way." "Your own way wasn't enough," I replied, surprised by how little their tears moved me now. I deserved parents who loved me unconditionally, not as an obligation or a prop in your social climbing. By the end of the meeting, we had reached several agreements. My parents would make a substantial donation to establish a scholarship in Sarah Mitchell's name. They would publicly acknowledge the adoption and fraud, sparing all of us the stress of drawn-out legal battles. And they would respect my decision regarding our future relationship, which for now would be minimal contact, as I processed 3 decades of deception. As they prepared to leave, my father paused, looking older and more vulnerable than I had ever seen him. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I am sorry. Not just for getting caught, but for what we did. To Sarah, to you, even to Megan in our own way. We thought we were building something important, but we just created a house of cards." I didn't respond immediately, letting his words settle in the space between us. Finally, I nodded once, not forgiveness exactly, but acknowledgement of his regret. After they left, James turned to me. "Are you okay?" "Not yet," I answered honestly. "But I will be." The story broke nationally the following day, a dramatic exposé of fraud, deception, and family secrets among Chicago's elite. For 48 hours, my phone exploded with interview requests from newspapers, television shows, and podcast hosts, eager to feature the adopted daughter who crashed a society wedding with explosive revelations. I declined them all. This story, my story, wasn't meant for public consumption or entertainment. It was the painful, messy process of reclaiming my identity and forging a path forward based on truth rather than lies. 1 month after the wedding that never happened, I met Megan for coffee again. She looked different, more grounded, somehow less performative. "I'm moving to Seattle," she announced. "Starting over where no one knows the Calloway name or cares about Chicago society drama." "That sounds healthy," I said, genuinely pleased for her. "What will you do there?" "I've applied to graduate school social work, if you can believe it." She laughed at my surprised expression. "I know, right? The former princess wants to help people with actual problems. But after everything, I need my life to mean something real." "I think you'll be good at it," I said, and meant it. Beneath the polished exterior Megan had cultivated to please our parents, there had always been intelligence and drive. Redirected toward something meaningful, those qualities could make her an excellent social worker. "What about you?" she asked. "Will you stay in Chicago?" I hesitated, still uncertain about my own path forward. "For now. I'm getting to know Claire and James's family, my family, and I've been offered a promotion at work actually. Turns out standing up to powerful people impressed my boss." "And James, are you two figuring things out, slowly?" "It's complicated, building a sibling relationship with a stranger in your 30s. But we're trying." As we parted ways, Megan hugged me, a genuine embrace, not the air kisses she usually favored. "We'll always be sisters," she whispered. "The weird, complicated kind, with a hell of a story, but still, sisters." I hugged her back, finding comfort in the one constant relationship in my life, transformed though it was by the truth. Always. In the months that followed, I gradually reconstructed my life and identity. I visited Sarah's grave for the first time, placing wildflowers beside the simple headstone and introducing myself to the mother I never knew. I spent weekends with Claire and James's grandparents, my grandparents, absorbing family stories and discovering genetic traits I had never understood about myself. I began therapy to process the complex emotions around my adoption and upbringing. The Callaways maintained their distance, respecting my request for space. Occasionally, my mother sent carefully worded emails updating me on their lives or inquiring about mine. I responded briefly but politely, neither encouraging deeper connection nor completely severing ties. The scholarship in Sarah Mitchell's name became reality. providing educational funding for single mothers pursuing accounting degrees. At the inaugural award ceremony, I stood beside James and Claire, publicly acknowledging my biological family for the first time. A reporter covering the event asked me if I regretted exposing the truth so dramatically at my sister's wedding. "Truth isn't always convenient," I replied after careful consideration. "But living a lie costs more in the long run than facing reality, however painful that might be." As I approach the one-year anniversary of the wedding that changed everything, I find myself at peace with the complicated tapestry of my identity. I am Emma Mitchell by birth, Emma Calloway by upbringing, and simply Emma by choice. A woman defined not by the secrets others kept about me, but by the truth I fought to uncover. The family I have now isn't what I expected, or what society would recognize as traditional. It includes a half-brother I didn't know existed, a sister with no biological connection to me, grandparents I met in my 30s, and parents whose love came with conditions I can no longer accept. It's messy and imperfect, but it's honest, and that makes all the difference. 1 year after the wedding that never was, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror preparing for another ceremony altogether. The invitation had arrived 3 weeks earlier, heavy cream cardstock with embossed lettering. "Megan Calloway invites you to celebrate her graduation from the first year of her Master's in Social Work program." The small, intimate gathering would take place at a restaurant in Seattle, far from Chicago society, far from the shadow of our shared past. My acceptance had been immediate and genuine, a sign of how far we had both traveled in 12 months. As I fastened my mother's Sarah's locket around my neck, I reflected on the year's transformations. My parents had downsized to a smaller home in a different suburb, their social standing irrevocably altered, but their marriage surprisingly intact. My father had faced minor legal consequences for the long-ago fraud, ultimately settling with insurance companies and regulatory boards. They were, according to occasional updates from mutual acquaintances, more authentic with each other than they had ever been during their years of careful image management. Bradley and Megan had not reconciled, but neither had they parted as enemies. He had sent a generous contribution to her scholarship fund, along with a note that read simply, "For finding your true path." She had responded with equal grace, returning the engagement ring with a letter, releasing him from any lingering guilt or obligation. James and I had established a cautious but deepening relationship as siblings. We met weekly for coffee, gradually filling in the gaps in each other's lives and discovering the small, surprising connections that come from shared DNA. The same intolerance for cilantro, the identical way we organized our bookshelves, the mutual tendency to tap our fingers when thinking deeply. I had also ventured tentatively into dating again, this time with a transparency about my past that felt both vulnerable and liberating. My current relationship with Daniel, a forensic accountant I met through work, was built on a foundation of honesty that made our connection all the more meaningful. My phone buzzed with a text from Claire. "Flight landed. See you at dinner." My biological aunt had become a cherished presence in my life, a link to Sarah, and a source of warmth and acceptance I had rarely experienced growing up. As I gathered my purse and keys, I paused at the framed photo on my entryway table. Sarah Mitchell at 23, her heart-shaped face and dimpled cheek, so similar to my own. "I'm doing okay, Mom," I whispered, a ritual I had developed over the past year. "I'm finding my way." The flight to Seattle was smooth, the late spring weather clear and promising. When I arrived at the restaurant, Megan was already there, greeting guests in a simple blue dress that would have horrified our mother with its off-the-rack normalcy. "Emma," she called, embracing me with genuine warmth. "You came, I wouldn't miss it," I replied, returning her hug. "I'm proud of you." And I was. The Megan, who had once defined herself through designer labels and social connections, had evolved into a woman passionate about helping foster children navigate the system work. Inspired, she had told me, by reflecting on what my early childhood might have been like in achievement rather than appearances. Megan's new friends were diverse and unpretentious, her professors impressed by her dedication rather than her family name. Claire and James integrated seamlessly into the gathering, no longer secrets to be hidden, but family to be embraced. As dinner wound down, Megan clinked her glass for attention. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight, especially those who traveled so far. Her gaze rested meaningfully on me. But most of all, I want to thank my sister Emma. A year ago, she had the courage to expose the lies our family was built on. It was painful and messy, but it was also the greatest gift anyone has ever given me, the chance to discover who I really am, apart from the Callaway expectations. Tears pricked at my eyes as Megan continued. I thought losing my perfect wedding was the worst thing that could happen. Instead, it was the beginning of finding my authentic self. So here's to truth, however uncomfortable, and to the sister who loved me enough to insist on it. Glasses raised around the table as I swallowed against the emotion tightening my throat. When I could trust my voice, I responded, to new beginnings built on honest foundations. Later, as we walked along Seattle's waterfront in the gentle spring evening, Megan asked the question I had been expecting all day. Have you forgiven them, Mom and Dad? I considered carefully before answering. Forgiveness isn't a single decision, it's a process. I'm working on it for my own peace more than for them. But trust, that's a different matter entirely. She nodded, understanding in her eyes. They ask about you, you know. Every time we talk. And what do you tell them? That you're thriving. That you seem more yourself than you ever did growing up. She paused, then added quietly, that maybe someday when everyone has done enough healing, there might be room for a new kind of relationship. I didn't respond immediately, letting the possibility settle. The anger that had fueled me through the wedding confrontation had gradually transmuted into something more complex. Not forgiveness exactly, but a recognition that my parents too had been trapped in the web of lies they had woven. Their mistakes had caused real harm, but holding on to rage would only continue that harm into my own future. Maybe someday, I agreed, finally. But not yet. We continued walking the conversation, shifting to Megan's studies, my work, the lives we were building, separate from the identities we had been assigned in childhood. As we turned back toward her apartment, she mentioned casually, I've been thinking of legally changing my name. This surprised me. To what I don't know yet. Not Mitchell, that's yours and James's connection, but something new, something that's just mine. She looked at me sideways. Does that sound crazy? Not at all, I assured her. Names carry weight. Choosing your own is powerful. 2 days later, as my plane descended toward Chicago, I realized that the anniversary of the non-wedding had passed without the emotional upheaval I had anticipated. The date that had once represented the culmination of decades of family secrets had become simply another day in a life reconstructed on truth rather than deception. My phone chimed as we taxied to the gate, a text from Daniel, "Welcome home. Dinner at my place tonight, home." The word resonated differently now. Home was no longer the Callaway house, with its perfectly coordinated decor and carefully maintained appearances. Home was my condo, with its mismatched furniture and walls covered in photographs of the people I loved. Claire and James, Megan, my new friends, even a small framed image of Sarah that Claire had given me. Home was also the growing relationship with Daniel, built on honest disclosure and genuine acceptance. When I had told him about my past, the adoption, the confrontation, the family fracture, he had listened without judgment, then simply said, "Thank you for trusting me with your story." 6 weeks after Megan's celebration, an unexpected email arrived from my mother. The subject line was simple, Sarah's birthday. The message inside was brief, I realized today would have been Sarah's birthday. I thought you should have these. Attached were scanned photos I had never seen before, Sarah and my mother as college roommates laughing in their dorm room, hiking in what looked like Wisconsin. Dressed up for a formal event, arms around each other's waists. I stared at the images, these glimpses of a relationship that had shaped my entire existence yet remained largely mysterious to me. The carefree young women in the photos bore little resemblance to the controlled, status-conscious Vivian Calloway I had grown up with, or the tragic figure of Sarah Mitchell I had pieced together from others' memories. After considerable thought, I responded with equal brevity, "Thank you for these. They mean more than you know." It wasn't forgiveness or reconciliation, but it was acknowledgement of shared history, of complicated grief, of the tangled connections that bind us even when we try to sever them. The following weekend, James invited me to brunch with news of his own. "I'm moving to Chicago permanently," he announced. "I've accepted a partnership at a firm here." "That's wonderful," I said, genuinely pleased at the prospect of having my half-brother nearby. "What made you decide?" He hesitated, then admitted. "Partly you. Getting to know you this past year has been healing. I spent so much of my life angry about what happened to our mother, about you being taken by the Calloways. Actually building a relationship with you has helped me move beyond that anger." His words echoed my own journey, the gradual shift from righteous fury to something more nuanced and ultimately more peaceful. "I feel the same way," I told him. "Finding you, finding the truth. It's like a wound that festered for years has finally been cleaned and can start to heal properly." That evening, scrolling through social media, I came across a photo that stopped me cold. Bradley Winthrop was engaged again barely a year after his wedding to Meghan had imploded. His new fiancée was a politician's daughter. Their announcement featured in Chicago's social pages with the same fawning coverage once devoted to his relationship with my sister. My first instinct was to call Meghan to make sure she had seen the news and was okay. But before I could dial, I received a text from her with a screenshot of the announcement and a simple message. "Dodged a bullet." Her ability to laugh at what would once have devastated her was perhaps the most profound evidence of her transformation. The Meghan who had lived for social approval and our parents' validation was gone, replaced by a woman secure enough in her own identity to find humor in her past priorities. As summer turned to fall, I received another unexpected communication, an invitation to Thanksgiving dinner at my parents' new home. The card, written in my mother's elegant script, included a postscript: "No pressure, no expectations. Just an open door if you choose to walk through it." I deliberated for weeks, discussing the invitation with my therapist, with James, with Claire, even with Meghan, who had already declined in favor of volunteering at a homeless shelter in Seattle. "Whatever you decide is valid," James assured me. "There's no right answer here." The morning before Thanksgiving, I made my decision. I called my parents' house for the first time in over a year. "I won't be coming tomorrow," I told my mother when she answered, her voice carefully neutral. "But I'd like to meet for coffee next week, just the two of us." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken emotions. "I would like that very much," she finally replied, a tremor in her voice betraying the composure she struggled to maintain. That small step, not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but openness to conversation, felt like the right balance between honoring my own boundaries and acknowledging the complex humanity of the woman who had raised me, however imperfectly. Instead of the traditional family Thanksgiving, I hosted a gathering at my condo for James, Claire, who had flown in from Seattle, Daniel, and a few close friends. As we sat around my table, sharing food and stories and genuine laughter, I was struck by the realization that this chosen family, built on truth and mutual respect, was what I had been seeking all along. Later that evening, as the gathering wound down and guests departed, Daniel lingered, helping me clear dishes and store leftovers. In the comfortable silence of domestic tasks shared, he asked the question that had been hovering between us for months. "Move in with me. My lease is up in January, and I thought maybe we could find a new place together." The old Emma might have hesitated, might have calculated the risks, and retreated to the safety of independence. The woman I had become over the past year recognized the value of vulnerability, of building connections based on choice rather than obligation. Yes, I said simply, let's create something new together. As the year anniversary of the wedding that wasn't approaches its conclusion, I find myself in a place I could never have imagined when I received that text banning me from my sister's ceremony. The family I was born into has been irreversibly altered, the family I was raised in, fractured and cautiously rebuilding, and the family I have chosen, flourishing in ways I never dared to hope for. The truth, as I told that reporter a year ago, isn't always convenient. But living authentically, however complicated and messy that might be, has given me something I never had in 31 years as the shadow daughter of the Calloway family, the freedom to be fully unapologetically myself. Sarah Mitchell gave me life twice, once through birth and again through the discovery of my true identity. In honoring her memory and embracing her legacy, I've found not just answers about my past, but direction for my future. And that perhaps is the most unexpected gift of all. You know, telling this story has been such a journey for me, and I'm so grateful you stayed with me until the end. If you've ever experienced family karma or justice in your own life, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Your story might help someone else who's going through something similar right now. And if this resonated with you at all, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this with anyone who might need to hear that truth, however painful, eventually leads to healing. Thank you so much for listening to my family revenge story. The lessons I've learned have changed me forever, and I hope they've given you something meaningful too. Until next time.